Star Wars Battlefront 2. The last time I played this game, EA stock was in a nosedive from the insane loot crate debacle that they created surrounding this game. The game itself actually served as a catalyst to put anti-loot box laws and government regulations into place in many countries around the world, with the US soon to follow suit. A bill is currently being pushed forward that will ban the sale of loot crates in video games to minors in the US, which will ultimately force many game developers to rethink their plans for microtransactions, especially EA, since FIFA is one of their main money makers and their loot crate system is a big reason behind that. Now, with all that out of the way, here we are once again looking at a game that now has historical significance outside of just the Star Wars universe. And I gotta say, Battlefront 2 has actually made some really nice changes since I last played. It almost gives me hope for a Battlefield 5 turnaround, except that this game, as far as we know, didn't suffer from an extremely rushed production cycle. Now, in Battlefront 2, the entire progression system has been revamped and real-world currency stuff appears to be tied into cosmetics only. Upgrading your heroes and classes now takes time and is awarded for playing and scoring with that class. Basically a normal game progression system. Cards still exist and are fundamentally the way you enhance your classes and can be upgraded, but you won't find them in loot crates anymore. You just get them for ranking up and spending your skill points that you get from actually playing the game. There's still a little bit of an advantage element in game for sure. Anyone who has a ton of hours spent grinding and upgrading gets things like health bonuses and faster ability recharge times, but since this is predominantly a team-based game, the advantages feel a little bit less extreme because most firefights aren't 1v1 scenarios. Skill and strategy are the main dictators in who wins a firefight or battle. Luckily though, the passive advantages that you can earn can be mostly compensated for without too much game time spent. Fully maxing out your characters will take a bit longer though, but you can get most of the way there without too much time commitment. So, it seems like DICE have successfully removed any sort of pay-to-win mechanics from the game as it stands, and they've added tons of cosmetic items to the game that can actually be earned with in-game currency and not just paid for currency. So it seems like DICE has done a pretty good job of getting this game back on the right track here. Now, today is significant for the game as another content update has been released. There's been a lot of content updates since the last time I played this game, and today's one has Droidekas. Everybody loves Droidekas. Even if you don't know what Droidekas are, you're about to love them. The bubble shield roly-polies of the galaxy are now in the game, and they are quite cool. Also, they're very cheap. 1,000 in-game credits and you can spawn in with one of these guys, so expect to see them rolling all over the place. Hitting the left ability button turns you into the roll mode, or just hitting the sprint button will do the same thing, and rolling actually works really well. Considering it's a mechanic only used for a single unit in the entire game, it actually feels very solid, and you can even jump while doing it. It's extremely fast and allows you to get around the battlefield quickly, which is good considering that your other walking mode is insanely slow. These can also activate a powerful bubble shield when they're out of roll mode, but they're pretty slow while doing this, so they're really better in defensive situations. They can also activate a rapid fire function for additional damage output, which is pretty necessary because the TTK, or the damage output on these guys, is pretty low overall. Most players rolling around on these things seem to set up on a point, activate their bubble shields, and just go to town, since you can shoot through your own bubble shield but the enemy cannot. It sounds OP, right? Well, maybe not so much. The damage output on these guys is very low, so most players will have ample time to get away from you, and your extremely slow, normal movement mode won't really allow you to pursue them. If you find yourself on your own, you're also extremely vulnerable since you're just very slow and kind of cumbersome. And although you're actually quite fast when in the roly-poly mode, the transition time is lengthy, so it leaves you exposed with no shields while you're doing this. It's basically great to get from point A to point B, but once you're on point A or point B, using roly mode mid-combat isn't too realistic. They feel most effective when they're surrounded by friends, acting as damage sponges while the rest of your team does a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to dishing out damage. Personally, I was hoping for a little bit more oomph with these guys, but they do have to balance them at the end of the day. Also, I haven't fully upgraded mine, so I was working with a slightly smaller health pool than a topped off Droidekas, so maybe it gets a little bit better with upgrades. It is interesting that a lot of the heroes and their force powers aren't really that effective on you, like they can't choke you to death or force push you very far, but that doesn't exactly instill a huge amount of confidence when fighting Jedi. Despite in the film where Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi are forced to run away from just 2 Droideka, a Jedi in Battlefront 2 should have no problem dealing with a few of these guys. Then again, most classes on their own don't stand up too well against Jedi either. You really have to make a team effort to take them down. Now with this update, they also added the TX-130 Republic fighter tank. You could think of this guy as sort of an uglier counterpart to the Separatist armored assault tank. What's nice about it though is finally having some good old tank-on-tank combat, and it does have a very powerful charge-up shot that might even be able to one-shot an enemy tank. I'll have to test it out further, but it seems quite powerful for a direct shot. Naturally, it also has a rapid fire mode and missiles because, well, why not? I ended up doing really well each time I picked this vehicle, so at a glance it does seem quite good, but of course you also have to spend more credits for it, so you get what you pay for, I suppose. There's also been a bunch of balance changes that I would certainly be more interested in if I was sunk into the meta a bit more with Battlefront 2, but I gotta get into the game meta a bit more before each individual balance change means that much to me. However, speaking of other updates, there were some cool cosmetic updates, and even going back through the amount of content I missed since essentially the launch period of this game, there is a crazy amount of new stuff that has me kind of oohing and awing like a kid in a candy store. Let me preface this by saying I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Like, I'm building a giant Lego Star Wars Yavin diorama in my free time, level of huge Star Wars fan. So it's possible that I'm a bit more giddy about these things than most, and seeing all the Clone Trooper cosmetic options that are now in this game is just pure eye candy. DICE really did go back and add in just about everything the community was asking for when it came to customization, so that's really nice to see when returning to this game. General Grievous is also in the game now. I totally suck with him, but he's there and he looks awesome, as you might expect. One of the things updated in this patch is the addition of Capital Supremacy mode to the Naboo map, which I actually hadn't played Capital Supremacy mode yet, but it's pretty cool. It basically begins as an equal footing game of conquest on one of the popular maps, and the winner of that round then goes on to attack the enemy team's capital ship, which is in a low orbit over the map itself, and you take a boarding party onto there and then play a second round fighting there. It's not a bad game mode at all, and it's certainly pulling on those nostalgia strings from the early days of Battlefront. And speaking of nostalgia strings, I gotta say the Geonosis map, which I hadn't played before, is also extremely cool if you're a fan of the Clone Wars era content from Star Wars. It's possibly one of the most impressively rendered versions of Geonosis, perhaps even better looking than the original films were, which is kind of funny to think about. The movies are old enough and CG was bad enough back then that modern day gaming does probably look better than the movie did itself. You could use it to re-render some of those cutscenes probably. Now personally, if DICE wanted to take a crack at introducing the second battle of Geonosis for fans of the Star Wars TV show, I think it would be awesome, and it's one of the coolest Star Wars battles in my opinion, at least ever shown on screen, even though it was a TV show. It was part of the animated TV show, so sure you didn't see the full live action glory of a big battle like this, but even so, it was a truly epic battle and it lasted 3 episodes. If you have to go back and watch any of the Clone Wars era TV show stuff, I would recommend watching the second Battle of Geonosis episodes. They are action-packed and very intense. And of course, speaking of the Clone Wars era content, Planet Felucia is also teased as the next map for this game. The map was only briefly shown in the films with a little bit of canon added to it in TV shows, and it's an extremely colorful environment and just looks like a very fun place to set up for a fight. I gotta say, Battlefront 2 looks like it's really come a long way since launch. Granted, I'm a casual player, I haven't gotten deep into the meta or understand maybe some of the underlying flaws and whatnot, but it really does look impressive and there's a lot to get me very excited about coming back and trying it out more. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more Battlefront 2 gameplay. I'm happy to get into this and play it a bit more and even get deeper into the meta and strategies and class setup stuff. It looks like fun and I had an absolute blast playing it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.